Do you daydream often? Does your mind wander aimlessly through the space surrounding you as you conjure mental images to take part in the scene that you are directing? Do you sometimes feel like you can float when you are happy or drown when you are down? I would reckon most of you watching right now answered some of these questions with a yes. And I reckon you are probably asking yourself right now, why is it important to even ask these questions? For that, I have the answer right here for you. What if I told you that there are people that live amongst us where daydream happenings affect them strongly as ever, where the perception of the environment surrounding them is warped and twisted in ways they could never fully explain, nor could any experts interested in their case? They see the world from a very different and sometimes overtly cartoonish eye. Objects are bigger than they used to, or smaller than they have ever been. Even their perception of self is not spared in this whirlwind of magnificent imagination. Their bodies tangled and reshaped to a conclusion that leaves them confused and distraught. It is like they have been struck with something otherworldly, or perhaps have taken a short trip to lands beyond what the human mind can comprehend and endure. Does that sound familiar? A wonderland where rules are bent and things are not as they seem all the time. If you are already mouthing it as you are hearing me describe it, then let me take the burden off of you and say what we are all thinking. Alice in Wonderland. That is the name that would be most synonymous with hallucinations of the sort that I just described, and indeed, the imagination that I was hinting at throughout this lengthy introduction has been the reality for some very unfortunate people. People who don't understand what is happening to them and why is it happening at all in the first place. The experts coined their condition Alice in Wonderland Syndrome, as their hallucinations and imaginations take inspiration from the works of Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland, and Alice Through the Looking Glass. And we will tell the tale of the first diagnosis and how the sciences evolved to better understand and hopefully treat such a rare mental condition. So, with introductions out of the way and our goal is set, hello everyone and welcome back to Masterpiece. Today, we're diving into the quite obscure and interesting mental condition, only known as Alice in Wonderland Syndrome, and discuss almost all of its unique cases and what causes it in the first place, all while tackling what modern medicine advises us to do to treat such a condition. Whether you're a longtime subscriber or this is your first time here, I'm thrilled to have you join me. In this video, we'll be exploring its characteristics. So, first things first, let us define the Alice in Wonderland Syndrome, which I will be calling Wonderland Syndrome for short from now on. Doctors and experts describe the Wonderland Syndrome as a neurological disorder that distorts the perception of the patient's environment and surroundings. How does it do that exactly? Well, as I just laid out in my introduction, Wonderland Syndrome can affect objects that you usually perceive and make them appear larger than usual, or smaller than usual, or even sometimes further and nearer than usual depending on the object and its natural proximity at the time. The visual distortions and hallucinations are just the most common symptoms of the Wonderland Syndrome, but that does not excuse distortions happening to the other senses, especially auditory ones. And these distortions are not only affecting the individual's surroundings, but sometimes even the individual themselves, where they may perceive parts of their body to be elongated or shortened for some time. It is most common in children, but once again, and especially later on when we talk about the first few cases, you can never exclude adolescents and even full-fledged adults and elders. It is just more common in children as far as we understand it. And that brings us to the chapter of understanding it in the first place, and let me tell you, the people with the most knowledge among us are struggling hard. It is, as of now, currently unknown and hotly debated how Wonderland Syndrome comes to be for an individual. Our best guess as to the causes of this Wonderland Syndrome has been associating it with migraines, head traumas, and severe head injuries that cause inflammation in the brain. Other than that, there are vague theories regarding electric currents that can affect how the blood flows in the brain, and as such cause the process of visual perception to be abnormal. But that is nothing but a theory at the time of this recording. There are not a lot of cases when it comes to Wonderland Syndrome, so research is as limited as it can get. What is very unique about this condition is the first documentation of it happened in 1904, just 30 or so odd years after the Alice in Wonderland story was published. The cases were very unique, with each patient reporting a myriad of things totally different and detached from anyone else's reporting of the same condition. Some will say they feel their heads ballooning and floating in the air, but they recognize their necks are still attached and they are laying in a bed in reality. Some say they perceive themselves to be very intimate with the ground beneath them as their bodies shorten and their proximity to the ground is null. Others feel the opposite, where distortions in their perceptions paint a picture where they look down on people surrounding them, even though they understand that they are not actually that tall. It becomes so disorienting and tiring for them to separate the distortion from the actual reality when their perception does them any favors. Most of these early cases I just described were elderly people with ages close to 80 and adults aged 30 and over, proving that despite its commonality in children, Wonderland Syndrome can affect adults just as much. These bizarre cases of migraine hallucinations got the doctors asking a lot of questions about its classification, especially after the cases increased in numbers and became more detailed in descriptions, with one case even explicitly stating she felt her body was distorted to be short and broad, just like Tweedledee or Tweedledum from the Looking Glass story. So, the experts sought to reclassify the condition and give it the name we now know it as today. But despite all this knowledge and clear case examples, the condition remained relatively obscure until 2 decades or so ago, when modern medicine became more advanced and allowed for a more in-depth look at the condition and what may cause and how we may treat it. So, how do we treat what we don't fully understand? Well, the experts in the field advise treating the underlying conditions first that may or may not affect the Wonderland Syndrome in the first place, which, as I described earlier, can range from migraines to severe head traumas. Wonderland Syndrome in most cases is as benign as it can be, but that seemingly all depends on the underlying conditions and how severe they may be. There are certain prescriptions that are given out that can help to ease away this condition, but it is never our job to tell you which drugs you may use. We leave it to the doctors, who will treat each unique case as best as they can, with the careful amount of care. It might seem bleak to walk in the shadows blinded and hope for the best, but we do what we can as we stay informed and healthy. Our world can be very frightening and bleak, while also interesting and unique. Things like the Wonderland Syndrome are not something you just hear about so casually in your life, but it opens your mind to the knowledge out there that is waiting for us to consume and indulge in. But as we traverse this land of knowledge, let us never forget to be safe and sound. And there you have it. I hope you found this video helpful and learned something new. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more content like this. Don't forget to hit that notification bell to stay updated. If you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover next, make sure to drop them in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.